So, I'm going to be talking to you today about Earth. This is one of the sermons in a series about the elements. But what are the elements? Well, if you're talking modern science, you're talking about the chemical elements in the periodic tables. But if we look back through history, we see that our ancestors created many different theories and ideas that attempted to explain this world and how it's composed. Interestingly, there was one theory that was common to nearly all early civilizations, and it identified 4 basic elements: earth, air, water, and fire. Collectively, these 4 elements are called the classical elements. One key difference between these classical elements and the modern concepts of the elements is that the classical elements were thought to have qualities and personalities, while the modern elements are purely physical and mathematical constructs. The classical elements were thought to interact with each other in specific ways to produce the natural world, while the modern elements interact according to the laws of physics and chemistry. The classical elements are no longer recognized as the building blocks of our world in scientific terms, of course, but they do loosely correlate to the modern idea of the states of matter: solid, earth; liquid, water; gas, air; plasma, fire. We can find variations on these classical elements in the early traditions of ancient Greece, Babylonia, Persia, Japan, China, India, among others. For the most part, these were independent cultures that mixed very little, yet each came to the same conclusion when theorizing about the makeup of our world, that our world is made up of 4 elements. And some of the ancient religious traditions and beliefs about these elements have carried on in some ways to this day. Now, I'm not a knowledgeable practitioner in any of these traditions, so forgive me if I don't describe them clearly or absolutely correctly, but I'll do my best to explain some of them. But first, wait. How many elements are there? I've been talking about the 4 classical elements, but some cultures identified a 5th element as well. For example, Plato in ancient Greece defined ether as the 5th element, which referred to a special, unknown substance that permeated everything and was more pure than any of the 4 terrestrial elements. Ancient Hinduism identified akasha, or void, as the 5th element, and ancient Tibetan philosophy and also the Japanese identified void as the 5th element. And the ancient Chinese identified metal and wood as the 5th and 6th element. And then there's love. Now, let's talk more specifically about Earth. Often when we refer to Earth now, we're talking about the planet that we live on, or we're talking about the ground beneath our feet, the soil, the mud. Now, in technical scientific terms, soil is made up of minerals, organic matter, water and air mixed in, and you also might include some living organisms like bacteria or microbes. And the composition of soil changes from one area to another. For example, the soil in a marsh is very different from that in a farmer's field, which is very different from the sandy lands, but it is soil in modern terminology. But the classical element earth, that's different. Let us start with earth in the Chinese tradition. In ancient Chinese tradition, earth or soil is one of the 5 elements that form what they call wuxing. Earth is the balance of both yin and yang in the wuxing philosophy, as well as the changing central point of physical matter. Its motion is centralizing, its energy is stabilizing. The earth is the element of abundance, nourishment, fertility, and the mother-to-child relationship in this tradition. This element is also regarded as central to balance and the place where energy becomes downward in movement. It's the symbol of stability or being properly anchored. Some of you may practice yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong. Yoga comes from a branch of Hindu philosophy, Astika, while the origins of Qigong and Tai Chi lie in China, with their philosophies based on concepts from traditional Chinese medicine and Taoist philosophy. But in all 3 of these practices, the term grounding is sometimes used. Grounding is connecting with the earth, both physically, as you stand on the ground, but also spiritually. On a spiritual level, when your feet touch the ground, especially when you're barefoot, you connect your body's energy system with the energy field of our planet. It means connecting to the grounding energy of the earth and the universe, using techniques such as meditation, chanting mantras, doing movements or breathing exercises. And I guess this is where we get our expression about being well-grounded. Being well-grounded is a term that often refers to such things as maintaining emotional and mental balance in one's life, or being deeply in touch with oneself, or staying focused in the now, the present, having a sense of purpose, or believing and trusting in yourself. According to these early religious traditions, connecting with nature, standing on the ground, feeling the earth beneath our feet and focusing on that can help us achieve this balance in our lives. And I guess that's why they call it being well-grounded. You're not flying all over the place. There's something else I want to talk about with respect to Hindu traditions around the earth element. It's interesting to note that in that tradition, the earth element is denoted by the Sanskrit term prithvi, which means both earth and mother goddess. Prithvi is the personification of earth itself, the essence of the element earth, Mother Earth. This is a powerful term for me and has been associated with many early cultures. I remember clearly many years ago when I was a part of the women's group in this church, we studied this. I remember studying from works entitled When God Was a Woman by Merlin Stone and Cakes for the Queen of Heaven by Shirley Rank, which describe the many matriarchal societies and goddess reverent traditions in many early cultures, and how they were undermined by ancient male-dominated tribes, including the Hebrews and later the early Christians. All references to Mother Earth were destroyed. Many early indigenous people in North America talked about Mother Earth as our true mother who gave us birth and maintained our life through hers. She was the mother of all living things. In First Nations worldviews and philosophies, a deep relationship with the earth involving respectful and sacred ties to the land that sustained them was always important. Interestingly, in these traditions, they did not claim ownership of the earth, but rather declared a sense of stewardship toward the land and all of its creatures. This sense of responsibility toward the land is more than a mental or even emotional obligation. It's tied again intrinsically to the spirit. By communing with all aspects of the earth, all activities of daily life can become an expression of the spirit. I've also read an essay recently called Touching the Earth by Bell Hooks, in which she describes the connection of the early African Americans that they had with the land, starting in the time of slavery. She also discusses in this essay how they and some of the indigenous people of the southern US shared their knowledge and respect for the life-giving forces that come from connecting with the land. She talks about the healing power of connecting with the earth and how many Black people who moved up north to dwell in the cities would sometimes return to the South, to the land, in search of spiritual nourishment. But when I think about my own personal connection to the earth, it's often in the form of a sensory experience. Earlier, we heard that story of my kids playing in the pool of clay and muck. And what was it that they felt as they felt the soft, sticky mud oozing up between their toes? And what did you feel when I asked you to imagine it? And about that poem, The Seed, which I wrote and read for you earlier. What did I feel when I was planting the seeds with my kids in the garden? What did I feel? A connection. A connection between me and the earth. A sensory connection. The earth, I touch it, I feel it, I smell it, I connect with it. And connecting with the earth connects me too with stories and memories related to the earth. My dad grew up on a farm in rural Saskatchewan. He didn't talk a lot about it, but from what I gather from the stories he did tell us, growing up on a prairie farm during the Depression in the 1930s was tough. His dad worked hard, plowed the fields, and sowed the seeds, and managed to feed the children. Feed the children. Yes, of course, the earth, the soil is what gives us much of our food. It gives the plants a place to grow their roots, to absorb moisture, providing food for animals and for us. Reverend Stephen told us a story last week about being thankful for all the things that help grow the food. And one of the biggest is this earth. As we touch the earth, we cannot forget what it provides for us. And I am thankful. But back to my connections to the earth through memories. Memories of my mom. She was the one who taught me how to plant flowers. She loved flowers. She loved her garden. And she passed all that knowledge and joy onto me. And sometimes later, as an adult, when I was gardening, digging in the earth to plant a seed, or smelling the lilies in the garden, sometimes I was not alone. She was with me. I used to garden a lot, and I loved it. And part of that was the connection I felt to the earth and my mother. It was a gift I got from her. I'm kind of sad these days because I haven't been able to garden recently. It's my arthritis. It's in my knees now. Now, I'm an occupational therapist by profession, so I know about all the stools and long-handled tools and raised flower beds and all kinds of ways I could do my gardening with my arthritis. But for me, it's not the same. I don't enjoy it, so I don't do it. But I'm sad. And I miss that bent over finger connection to the earth. And I also feel guilty about that. But I still do get joy from being in my backyard and looking at my garden. The perennials are still growing. My garden, my yard, is wonderful because sometimes living in the city, the buildings, the sidewalks, the parking lots, they keep us from feeling connected to the earth beneath us. Do you remember that song by Joni Mitchell, Big Yellow Taxi? It was released in 1970. I know, I'm dating myself here. She sang, "They paved paradise and put up a parking lot." But actually, here in Winnipeg, we should be thankful. Some of the students in my English classes come from very large cities elsewhere, like Tokyo, for example. And they talk about how wonderful it is here in Winnipeg to be able to walk underneath the trees in the parks of the city, feeling the earth beneath their feet, because they don't have much of that in their cities. And I feel so fortunate to have my backyard refuge. I want to tell you about something I saw in our driveway. Actually, I see it every year. We share our driveway with a neighbor, and between the two driveways, there's a crack in the cement. And along that crack, every year, we get dandelions growing. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't particularly love dandelions. But as I see them pushing up through that tiny crack in the cement, in the tiny spot of earth beneath the two slabs of the driveway, it warms my heart. I guess it's a bit symbolic for me. We humans have created quite an environmental mess in this world. I try and stay positive about the environment and was inspired by words from the World Environment Day website. We cannot turn back time, but we can grow forests and bring back soils. We can make peace with the land. This gives me hope. The dandelions poking through the cement, they give me hope. I just recently reread a book that I had read many, many years ago, The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck. It's old and dated, but what I loved about it were the beautiful and meaningful parts about Wang Lung, a Chinese farmer, and his connection to the land. Here is one quote about the farmers digging in their fields that I found very powerful. There was only this perfect sympathy of movement, of turning this earth of theirs over and over to the sun. This earth which formed their home and fed their bodies and made their gods. Sometime, in some age, bodies of men and women had been buried there. Houses had stood there, had fallen, and gone back to the earth. So would also their house sometime return into the earth. Their bodies also. Each had a turn at this earth. They worked on, moving together, producing the fruit of this earth. And this thought connects us with another well-known saying, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. This is a saying taken from the Common Book of Prayer, and it's used in literature and at funerals, basically saying that we as people come from the earth, that life gets its origins from the earth, and when we die, we return to that earth. So for me, the earth comes to symbolize that circle of existence, the circle of life of which we are a part. But the imagery goes beyond the mud and soil, doesn't it? Think of the sometimes dry earth that's taken up into the air in the form of dust blowing over the fields in the wind. The band Kansas said it well in a song that came out in 1977. Dust in the wind. All we are is dust in the wind. Now, some people find that thought a bit depressing, but I feel content with the understanding that I am just a small part of something much, much bigger that I can't understand. I think Joni Mitchell sang a much more positive perspective of the same idea in another one of her songs, Woodstock. This is what she said. We are stardust, billion-year-old carbon. We are golden, caught in the devil's bargain. And we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. Every atom in our bodies and in the earth beneath us came from the stars which exploded billions and billions of years ago. We are all connected. We are all part of everything. And my connection to the earth beneath me reminds me of this every day. Please join us now in singing our closing hymn, number 1011, in your teal hymnal, Return.